There's a kind of falling that doesn't destroy you, it reshapes you. Most people think transformation comes from rising, from climbing higher, pushing harder, becoming more. But that's not how it works. Real transformation begins when you fall, when everything you thought you were crumbles, when the ground you've been standing on gives way, and you discover there was never solid ground to begin with. The silent persistence of those who transform isn't about never falling. It's about what happens after. It's about the quiet, invisible endurance of those who keep walking, even when broken, who turn the collapse into a path. You don't hear their stories because they're not loud. They're not posting breakthroughs on social media. They're not claiming to have it all figured out. They're just moving, one step, then another, falling, rising, falling again. And somewhere in that rhythm, the fall stops being failure. It becomes the way forward. This video is for those who are falling right now and don't yet know they're being transformed. There's something strange about hitting the ground. You'd think it would feel like an ending, but it doesn't. Not always. Sometimes, the fall itself becomes the doorway. The psychology of pain teaches us that suffering isn't the problem. It's the resistance to seeing what the suffering reveals. And when you stop fighting the descent, when you let your knees meet the dirt without shame, something inside you shifts. Not dramatically, not like the movies, but quietly, like a mirror turning inward for the first time. The collapse isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is spending your whole life avoiding it. Eastern philosophy has always whispered this truth, that the lowest point is also the most honest. There's a reason the river carves its deepest channel in the valley, not on the mountain. Emotional pain strips away the pretense. It removes the mask you didn't even know you were wearing. You lose the job, the relationship ends, the identity you built crumbles, and suddenly you're standing there with nothing but your own breath. No title, no role, just you, raw, exposed, awake. That's where self-awareness begins. Not in books, not in therapy sessions, but in the wreckage of what you thought was permanent. Most people panic here. They scramble to rebuild, to fix, to return to normal. But normal was the problem. Normal was the illusion. The mind-body connection knows this even when the ego doesn't. Your body has been screaming for years. Tightness in the chest, exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure, a numbness you can't explain. The collapse is the body's final act of honesty. It's saying, I can't carry this anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's not weakness. Maybe that's the first real act of courage you've had in years. The willingness to stop holding up a version of yourself that was never truly yours. Buddhism calls it dukkha, the persistent ache of existence, the friction between what is and what we wish would be. Suffering and awakening aren't opposites. They're lovers. One births the other. You can't have clarity without first having chaos. You can't reach enlightenment through pain without first admitting that you're in pain. Shadow work begins here, in the rubble. Carl Jung said the shadow isn't evil, it's everything you refuse to look at. The collapse forces you to look, not because you want to, but because there's nowhere left to hide. The temple has fallen, the sword has shattered, and in the silence that follows, you hear something you've been ignoring for decades, the truth. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop running from the fall is the moment you realize you were never falling at all. You were descending. There's a difference. Falling implies losing control. Descending implies going deeper, on purpose, into the parts of yourself that need to be seen. Zen philosophy teaches that enlightenment isn't about escaping the world. It's about fully entering it, pain included, grief included, fear included. When you collapse, you're not breaking, you're breaking open, and what spills out isn't weakness. It's everything you've been too afraid to become. The fall isn't the end of your story. It's the prologue to the one you were always meant to write. There's a war happening inside you, and most people don't even know they're fighting it. It's the quiet battle between who you've been and who you're becoming. The old name, the one carved by expectations, wounds, and survival, sits heavy on your chest, like armor you forgot you were wearing. You carry it everywhere, in conversations, in choices, in the mirror. And for a long time, it protected you. It gave you shape when you had none. But now it's suffocating. The psychology of pain shows us that identity isn't fixed. It's a story we tell ourselves until the story stops fitting. And when it stops fitting, the discomfort is unbearable. Eastern philosophy has a name for this: attachment, not to things, but to the idea of who you think you are. You cling to the old version because letting go feels like death, and in a way it is. Ego dissolution doesn't mean you disappear. It means the false you dissolves, so the real you can breathe. But the ego fights back, hard. It whispers, if you're not this, then what are you? It reminds you of every identity you've built, the successful one, the strong one, the one who never breaks. Taoism calls this rigidity. The bamboo bends in the storm. The oak snaps. You've been the oak for too long, and now the wind is here. The hardest part isn't admitting you've changed. It's admitting you were never who you thought you were in the first place. Trauma healing begins when you stop defending the wounds that shaped you and start seeing them for what they are: chapters, not commandments. You were the good child, the reliable friend, the one who never needed help. And those roles served you. They kept you safe. But safety isn't the same as truth. Somewhere along the way, you confused survival with identity. You became what was necessary, not what was natural. And now, years later, you're standing in the wreckage of a life that looks successful but feels hollow. Buddhism teaches impermanence, anicca. Nothing lasts. Not your body, not your beliefs, not your sense of self. The person you were 5 years ago is already gone. The person you'll be 5 years from now hasn't arrived yet. So why do we grip so tightly to the version in between? Because the unknown is terrifying. The mind craves certainty, even if that certainty is painful. You'd rather stay in a familiar prison than step into an unfamiliar freedom. But here's what shadow work reveals. The old name isn't protecting you anymore. It's haunting you. Every time you try to move forward, it pulls you back. Every time you reach for something new, it reminds you of who you used to be. Let's be practical. Think about the labels you carry. I'm not the kind of person who I've always been. People know me as. Now ask yourself, are those truths or are they scripts? If you've ever said, I'm just not good at setting boundaries, that's not a fact. It's a story. And stories can be rewritten. Zen philosophy teaches us that the self is not a solid thing. It's a river, always moving, always changing. The moment you try to freeze it, you lose it. The weight of the old name isn't just heavy, it's outdated. You're trying to wear a coat that doesn't fit anymore, and every step forward tears the seams a little more. The question isn't whether you'll take it off. The question is how long you'll keep pretending it still protects you. Silence is terrifying, not the kind that follows a conversation, but the kind that follows noise. Years of it. When the distractions finally stop, when you're not running toward the next task or drowning in the next scroll, something rises, something you've been avoiding. Eastern philosophy calls it the shadow, but it's not evil. It's just everything you refused to feel, every fear you postponed, every wound you buried under productivity, every version of yourself you abandoned because it wasn't convenient. The mind-body connection doesn't forget. Your body remembers what your mind tries to erase. And in stillness, the body speaks. Most people fill their lives with sound because they're afraid of what they'll hear in the quiet. Buddhism teaches that meditation isn't about peace, it's about presence. And presence means seeing what's actually there, not what you wish was. When you sit still long enough, the shadow doesn't attack you. It simply reveals itself. The anger you've been swallowing for years, the grief you never gave permission to surface, the shame that's been running your decisions from the background. Shadow work isn't about fixing these things. It's about finally looking at them without flinching. Because the shadow doesn't need to be defeated. It needs to be seen. Here's what happens in the silence. You meet the parts of yourself you've been negotiating with, the part that's exhausted from pretending, the part that resents the sacrifices no one acknowledges, the part that's angry at how much you gave and how little you received. These aren't monsters, they're messengers. Emotional pain is information, not punishment. It's your psyche saying, something here needs attention, but you've been too busy to listen, too afraid to stop, because stopping means facing the truth, and the truth is inconvenient. It doesn't fit the narrative you've been selling to the world or to yourself. Taoism speaks of Wu Wei, effortless action, the art of non-forcing. But before you can flow, you have to stop fighting. You have to let the river of your own consciousness show you what it's been carrying. Think about the last time you sat alone with no phone, no plan, no escape. How long did it take before the discomfort arrived? 5 minutes? 2? That discomfort isn't random. It's the shadow knocking. It's everything you've been running from, finally catching up. And the more you run, the louder it gets. Suffering and awakening are two sides of the same mirror. You can't have clarity without first having courage. The courage to sit with what hurts. Let's talk practically. Try this. Sit in a quiet room for 10 minutes. No music, no distractions. Just you and your breath. Watch what rises. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's a memory you thought you'd forgotten. Don't fix it. Don't analyze it. Just let it be there. This is mindfulness, not as a trend, but as a practice of honest witnessing. The shadow isn't revealed through force. It's revealed through stillness. And once it's revealed, once you see it clearly, it loses its power. Not because it disappears, but because you finally stop pretending it isn't there. The sword that cuts through illusion is forged in silence. And the first illusion it cuts is your own. There comes a moment when everything you leaned on stops holding you up. The job that defined you, the relationship that gave you purpose, the belief system that made the world make sense. One by one, they fall away. And you're left standing there, stripped bare, with nothing but the raw truth of your existence. This isn't a breakdown. This is ego dissolution in real time. Eastern philosophy has been teaching this for centuries, that the self you think you are is constructed, not discovered. It's a collection of roles, labels, and stories. And when those stories crumble, when the temple collapses, you're forced to ask the most terrifying question of all. Without these things, who am I? The psychology of pain reveals something brutal. Most of what you call you is borrowed. Your opinions came from somewhere. Your fears were learned. Your identity was shaped by trauma, culture, and survival. You became what was safe, what was rewarded, what kept you from being abandoned. And for a long time, that worked, but now it doesn't. Now the armor is too tight, the mask is suffocating, and the worst part, you don't know what's underneath. You've been playing a character for so long that you forgot you were acting. Spiritual transformation begins when the performance ends, when you can no longer pretend, when the weight of maintaining the illusion becomes heavier than the fear of letting it go. Buddhism calls this anicca, impermanence. Everything changes, everything dissolves. Clinging to any version of yourself is like trying to hold water in your fist. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. But we do it anyway. We cling to title, achievements, relationship, anything that gives us a sense of solidity in a world that refuses to stay still. The dismantling of identity isn't punishment. It's liberation disguised as loss. When everything you thought you were falls away, what remains is what you actually are. Not the story, not the role, just the awareness that's been watching the whole time. The witness behind the performance. Let's be honest about what this feels like. It feels like drowning. It feels like you've lost your footing and there's no ground beneath you. People ask, "How are you?" And you don't know how to answer because you don't know who's answering anymore. The old scripts don't work. The old strategies fail. You try to go back to what was comfortable, but it doesn't fit anymore. That's the void. That's samsara, the cycle of suffering that comes from clinging to what was never meant to last. Shadow work forces you to confront this. It asks, what are you without your achievements, without your relationships, without your past? And the answer is terrifying until it's not. Here's the paradox. You think losing your identity means losing yourself, but it's the opposite. You're not losing yourself, you're losing the costume. Think about it. If you're a parent and suddenly you're not, who are you? If you're successful and suddenly you fail, who are you? These aren't rhetorical questions, they're invitations. Zen philosophy teaches that enlightenment through pain comes when you stop defending who you think you are and start discovering who you've always been beneath the noise. The dismantling isn't the end, it's the clearing, the fire that burns away the dead wood so something real can grow. And what grows there isn't weaker, it's truer. It's the version of you that doesn't need validation, doesn't need proof, doesn't need a name. It just is. There's a place between who you were and who you're becoming. It has no name, no map, no timeline. You're not broken anymore, but you're not whole yet either. You're just suspended, floating in a space where nothing makes sense and everything feels uncertain. This is the living void, the in-between state where transformation brews quietly, painfully, without witnesses. Eastern philosophy calls it the bardo, the liminal space between death and rebirth. You're not dead, but you're not alive in the way you used to be. And the hardest part, there's nothing to do here. No fix, no shortcut, just endurance, just breathing through the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. The psychology of pain teaches us that transformation doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in the waiting, in the silence, in the slow, agonizing process of becoming something new without knowing what that new thing is. You want answers, you want clarity, you want someone to tell you, this is what happens next. But no one can, because this void is yours alone. Taoism speaks of Wu Wei, effortless action, the art of letting things unfold without force. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It means trusting the process, even when the process looks like nothing. Even when it feels like you're doing it wrong, because you're not doing anything at all. The river doesn't rush, it flows. And right now, you're learning to flow through the emptiest part of the current. Most people can't stay here. They panic. They grab at anything that feels like solid ground. Old habits, old relationships, old versions of themselves they swore they'd left behind. It's not weakness, it's terror. The mind craves certainty, and the void offers none. But here's what shadow work reveals. The void isn't empty. It's full of everything you've been avoiding, full of grief, rage, longing, fear, full of the parts of yourself you buried because they didn't fit the story you were telling. And now, with no distractions, no defenses, you have to feel it all. Not to punish yourself, not to drown, but to integrate, to let those parts finally speak, to stop running and start listening. Buddhism teaches that suffering and awakening are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. The void is where they meet. It's where you stop resisting the pain and start learning from it. Think about a seed buried in the soil. It's dark, it's claustrophobic, there's no sign of life. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are forming. The shell is cracking. The seed is dying so the plant can live. That's you, right now, in the dark, breaking open. And it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like disintegration. But trauma healing doesn't follow a straight line. It spirals. It doubles back. It asks you to trust what you can't see and believe in what hasn't happened yet. Let's get practical. How do you survive the void? You don't try to escape it. You don't numb it with work, substances, or endless scrolling. You sit with it. You journal. You walk in nature without your phone. You let yourself cry in the shower without needing a reason. You read books that speak to this exact experience. When Things Fall Apart, Pema Chödrön, The Dark Night of the Soul, by St. John of the Cross, The Road Less Traveled, by M. Scott Peck. These aren't self-help books, they're mirrors. They show you that the void isn't failure, it's initiation. Mindfulness isn't about feeling good, it's about feeling real. And in the void, you feel everything, the good, the bad, the unbearable. But you also feel something else, something quiet, something steady, a knowing that says, you're still here, you're still breathing, and that's enough. The void doesn't last forever, but it lasts exactly as long as it needs to. And on the other side, something is waiting. No one sees this part. The world moves on, and you move with it, but you're not the same. You're carrying something now, something heavy, something unnamed. You wake up, you go through the motions, you smile when you're supposed to, but inside, you're holding yourself together with invisible threads. This is the silent persistence, the part of transformation no one talks about because it's not dramatic. There's no climax, no breakthrough moment, just the quiet, relentless act of continuing when everything in you wants to stop. Eastern philosophy honors this. It doesn't glorify the warrior who wins the battle. It honors the one who keeps walking even when the path disappears. That's you. Broken maybe, but still moving. The psychology of pain shows us that resilience isn't loud. It's not the motivational speech or the triumphant comeback. It's the person who gets out of bed even though they don't want to. The one who brushes their teeth, makes coffee, and faces another day even though yesterday nearly destroyed them. Shadow work isn't just about confronting the darkness. It's about living with it, carrying it, not as a burden, but as proof that you survived. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment through pain doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you learn to walk with it. You stop waiting for the day you're healed and start living as someone who's healing. There's a difference. One is a destination, the other is a practice. Most people don't understand this persistence because it's invisible. They see you functioning and assume you're fine. They don't see the nights you spent staring at the ceiling, convincing yourself to make it to morning. They don't see the conversations you have with yourself just to get through the next hour. They don't see the weight you carry in your chest, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure, the grief that shows up uninvited at random moments. Trauma healing isn't linear. Some days you're strong, some days you're barely standing, and both are valid. Both are part of the process. The silent persistence isn't about being strong all the time. It's about choosing to stay, even when leaving feels easier. Taoism speaks of water, soft, yielding, but unstoppable. It doesn't fight the rock, it flows around it, over it, through it, and eventually, the rock erodes. That's what persistence looks like. Not force, not aggression, just the slow, patient refusal to quit. You're not trying to conquer your pain. You're learning to coexist with it, to let it shape you without letting it define you. Suffering and awakening walk hand in hand here. The suffering teaches you endurance. The awakening shows you why it mattered. You persist not because you're superhuman, but because something inside you, something quiet, something ancient, refuses to let you fall all the way down. Let's be real about what this looks like in practice. It's the single mum who works 2 jobs and still shows up for her kids even though she's exhausted. It's the person who survived abuse and chooses every single day not to become the abuser. It's the entrepreneur who failed 3 times and is building a 4th business. Not because they're fearless, but because they can't not try. It's you reading this, feeling seen for the first time in months. The silent persistence isn't glamorous, it doesn't get applause, but it's sacred. It's the mind-body connection saying, I'm still here, I'm still breathing, I'm still worth it. And maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's the most powerful thing you've ever done. The quiet refusal to give up. The invisible strength that no one sees, but you feel. And that feeling, that's what carries you into what comes next. There's a shift that happens so quietly you almost miss it. You stop trying to fix yourself. You stop forcing the transformation. And something strange occurs. You begin to change anyway. Not because you're pushing, but because you're finally allowing. Eastern philosophy has a word for this. Wu Wei, effortless action. The art of letting things unfold without interference. It's not passivity, it's trust. Trust that the river knows where it's going. Trust that the path is shaping you, even when you can't see the destination. For so long, you've been trying to control the outcome, to engineer your own awakening. But spiritual transformation doesn't work that way. It happens when you stop reaching and start receiving. The psychology of pain reveals something paradoxical here. The more you fight to become someone new, the more you stay stuck in the old patterns. Because fighting is still a form of resistance, and resistance is what keeps you trapped. Buddhism teaches non-attachment, not as indifference, but as freedom. Freedom from the need to be anything other than what you are. Right now, in this moment. You're not broken, you're not behind, you're exactly where you need to be. And the moment you stop arguing with that reality, the moment you stop trying to speed up the process or skip the hard part, something softens. The path doesn't change, you do. You stop walking against the current and start flowing with it. Most people struggle here because they've been conditioned to believe that growth requires effort, that transformation is something you achieve through force. But that's the Western mind talking, the one obsessed with productivity, with results, with proving your worth through struggle. Taoism offers a different way. It says the bamboo doesn't force itself to grow. It doesn't wake up every day and push harder. It simply responds to the conditions around it. Rain comes and it drinks. Sun comes and it reaches. Winter comes and it bends. You're not a project to be completed. You're a process to be lived. And the process doesn't need your permission. It's already happening. The only question is, will you resist it or will you dance with it? Shadow work taught you to see what was hidden. Ego dissolution stripped away what was false. But now you're learning something deeper. You're learning that becoming isn't something you do, it's something you allow. Think about the way a wound heals. You don't force it, you clean it, you protect it, and then you let the body do what it knows how to do. You trust the process. The same is true for emotional pain. You can't rush healing. You can't micromanage enlightenment. You can only show up, stay present, and let the mind-body connection do its work. Trauma healing happens in its own time, not yours. And that's not a failure, that's wisdom. Here's what this looks like practically. Stop setting timelines for your growth. Stop saying, I should be over this by. Stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Instead, ask yourself, what does my body need today? Rest, movement, silence, connection. Listen, really listen. Not to what you think you should want, but to what you actually need. Maybe it's a walk in the morning with no destination. Maybe it's saying no to plans, even though you should go. Maybe it's reading poetry instead of self-help books. Meditation and suffering meet here, in the practice of simply being with what is. Not fixing it, not analyzing it, just letting it breathe. The path that reveals itself slowly doesn't announce its arrival. It whispers, and if you're too busy forcing, you'll miss it. But if you soften, if you trust, the way forward becomes clear. Not all at once, just one step, and then another, and that's enough. You wanted a map. You wanted someone to tell you exactly how this would go, step by step, so you could control it. But transformation doesn't work like that. It doesn't arrive with instructions. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It happens in the margins, in the small, unremarkable moments no one else sees. You're different now, but you can't pinpoint when it happened. You just are. Eastern philosophy calls this the natural way, the unfolding that occurs when you stop interfering. The path doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself slowly, quietly, one breath at a time. And the only way to walk it is to trust that each step, even the ones that feel like mistakes, is leading you somewhere real. The psychology of pain teaches us that healing isn't a destination, it's a direction. You're not trying to arrive at some final version of yourself where everything is resolved and nothing hurts anymore. That's a fantasy. What you're doing is learning to walk with your wounds, to integrate your shadow, to carry your past without letting it carry you. Buddhism speaks of the middle way, not too tight, not too loose, not forcing, not fleeing, just walking. one foot in front of the other. Some days you feel strong, some days you feel like you've regressed. But regression isn't failure, it's information. It's the path showing you what still needs attention. Suffering and awakening aren't separate journeys. They're the same journey, seen from different angles. Most people give up here because they expect progress to be visible. They want proof. They want someone to notice how far they've come. But real transformation doesn't have an audience. It happens in private. In the shower where you cry and no one hears. In the journal you write at 3 a.m. when sleep won't come. In the decision to stay even when leaving feels easier. Shadow work isn't performative, it's sacred. And the path that comes from it isn't one you walk for applause. You walk it because something inside you, something older than your fear, deeper than your doubt, knows this is the way. Not the easy way, not the fast way, just the true way. Taoism teaches that the river doesn't question its course. It doesn't wonder if it's going the right direction. It flows. And where it meets resistance, it adapts. It carves through rock, not with force, but with persistence. That's you. You're not the same person you were a year ago. You're not the same person you were a month ago. The changes are subtle, but they're real. Maybe you set a boundary you wouldn't have set before. Maybe you walked away from something that used to have power over you. Maybe you let yourself feel something you used to bury. These aren't small things. These are seismic shifts disguised as ordinary moments. Enlightenment through pain doesn't look like, it looks like clarity. And clarity doesn't shout, it whispers. Let's talk about what this means in your life right now. Maybe you're not where you thought you'd be. Maybe the transformation didn't look like you imagined, but look closer. What conversations are you no longer willing to have? What relationships have you outgrown? What patterns have you broken, even if no one noticed? Mindfulness asks you to see these things, to honor them. You're not behind. You're exactly where the path has led you. And the path knows something you don't. It knows where you're going, even when you can't see it yet. Spiritual transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more yourself. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. The path reveals itself one step at a time. And you're already walking it. You've been walking it all along. The only question is whether you'll keep going, not because you know where it leads, but because the walking itself has become the point. So here's the question you have to ask yourself. Are you still afraid of the fall? Or have you realized it was never about hitting the ground? It was about what you do once you're there. The silent persistence isn't a trait you're born with. It's a choice you make every single day, in the moments no one sees, in the decisions that don't get applause, in the quiet refusal to give up on yourself, even when the world has moved on. You're not broken, you're breaking open, and what spills out isn't weakness, it's everything you were too afraid to become. The path doesn't wait for you to be ready, it reveals itself as you walk, slowly, painfully, beautifully. And the people who transform, they're not the ones who never fell, they're the ones who fell and kept walking anyway. You've already started, you wouldn't be here if you hadn't. So tell me, what are you still holding on to that no longer serves you? And what would happen if you let it fall? If this video spoke to something in you, don't look away. Stay with it, let it settle, because there's more waiting for you here. More truths, more mirrors, more paths that only reveal themselves to those willing to walk in the dark. Keep walking, the next lesson awaits you.